My name is Sarah Johnson. I'm 58 years old, and right now I'm lying in a wrecked car at the bottom of a mountain ravine. An hour ago, my daughter Keisha and her boyfriend Derek deliberately rammed our car and pushed us into the abyss. Pain shoots through my body, the taste of metal lingers in my mouth. But physical suffering is nothing compared to the realization that my own child tried to kill me. The story I'm about to tell will show how a family can hide the most monstrous lies behind a facade of love and care. 30 years ago, Marcus and I lived in a 2-story house in the suburbs of Atlanta. I worked as a social worker while Marcus owned a construction company specializing in restoring old buildings. His skilled hands brought abandoned houses back to life. We had 2 daughters who couldn't have been more different from each other. Jasmine, the eldest, radiated joy from the very first day of her life. She dreamed of becoming a pediatrician, rescued injured birds, helped her father on construction sites, and bombarded him with questions about how everything worked. Keisha, on the other hand, was a mystery. A quiet girl with attentive dark eyes, she preferred solitude to noisy games. She painted strange pictures in dark colors, and when asked, "What is this?" she would simply reply, "Pictures from my head." Family dinners were held at the oak table Marcus had built. Jasmine eagerly shared school news and future plans, while Keisha sat silently, eating and watching us with a gaze far too serious for her age. On Sundays, we went to the Baptist church, where Pastor Williams often praised our family before the congregation. Jasmine sang in the choir, her voice sounding like the music of angels. Keisha, meanwhile, studied the stained glass windows with an expression I could never understand. In the evenings, Marcus and I would sit on the porch, drink iced tea, and dream about the future. We imagined our daughters marrying, having children, and us becoming loving grandparents. I had no idea that in the mind of my younger daughter, a plan was already forming to destroy everything we had built. The first cracks appeared when Jasmine turned 18. She was preparing for graduation, applying to medical school, and dating Tommy Walker from the football team. 13-year-old Keisha suddenly developed an unhealthy interest in her sister's life. She eavesdropped on conversations, read Jasmine's personal notes, followed her every step. When I asked her why, she would simply say, "I'm studying how Jasmine lives." I thought it was nothing more than natural jealousy of the younger toward the elder. Jasmine was a star, beautiful, smart, popular. Teachers praised her, friends adored her, boys sought her attention. Keisha always remained in the shadows, and I assumed she just wanted to understand the secret of her sister's success. The tragedy happened on an October evening 20 years ago. Jasmine saw Tommy with another girl at the mall and came home in tears. She locked herself in her room and refused dinner. Around 10 o'clock, Keisha knocked on her sister's door. "Jazz, let's talk." I know how to fix things with Tommy. Half an hour later, both girls slipped quietly out of the house. Jasmine wore her favorite pink sweater, Keisha a dark jacket. I thought they had gone to talk it over, as sisters sometimes do, but an hour later, only Keisha returned. Pale, her clothes dirty, her hands cut. "Where's your sister?" I asked. "I don't know." We parted near the old park. "She wanted to be alone," Keisha replied, avoiding my eyes. Marcus and I didn't sleep all night, waiting for Jasmine. In the morning, the police called. They had found her body in the city park. She had fallen and struck the back of her head on a stone curb. "A tragic accident," the investigator concluded. "Most likely, she stumbled in the dark." I accepted that explanation without question. I couldn't imagine that the truth would turn out to be so much worse. The funeral was the most devastating day of my life. The church was filled with people, classmates, teachers, neighbors. Everyone cried, remembering her kindness and joy for life. Keisha sat beside me without shedding a single tear, motionless like a statue. While I wept inconsolably, she stared at the coffin with an expression that now, knowing the truth, fills me with horror. Marcus never left my side. He supported me when I could barely stand, whispered words of comfort, words that, as I now realize, must have tormented him because he knew the hidden truth. After the funeral, Keisha changed drastically. She became caring, attentive, as if trying to make up for her sister's absence. She helped with chores, comforted me in moments of grief, made tea when she saw me sad. I thought it was her way of coping with loss. What a delusion! In reality, she was crafting a flawless mask to conceal the demon inside. Time passed. The wound in my soul never healed, but we learned to live with the pain. Keisha grew into an attractive woman with a sharp mind and a talent for business. After graduating from university, she opened a chain of beauty salons called Royal Style and achieved impressive success. At 25, she married Brian Mitchell, a lawyer from an influential family. The wedding was lavish: lace gown, exotic flowers, a banquet in an exclusive club. Tears of joy filled my eyes as I watched my only daughter step into what I believed was happiness. But the marriage fell apart after 3 years. Keisha initiated the divorce, securing a house and a substantial portion of assets, and soon after began a relationship with Derek Thompson, a man 10 years her senior who called himself an investment consultant. Derek had the allure of a predator. Tall, with piercing gray eyes and a disarming smile, he flattered so artfully that his words felt like poetry. When Keisha introduced him to us, she made it easy for him to win over even the cautious Marcus. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, kissing my hand, "now I see where Keisha inherited her beauty." Nature never makes mistakes. I was charmed by his gallantry. I had no idea that those same lips would one day plot our murder. Meanwhile, Keisha's business flourished. Her beauty salons opened one after another, and magazines wrote about the talented young entrepreneur revolutionizing the industry. She drove luxury cars, wore designer clothes, vacationed in faraway countries. Alongside her success, she showed touching devotion to her parents. She called regularly, visited on holidays, showered us with generous gifts. For Marcus's milestone birthday, she hosted an extravagant celebration at an upscale restaurant. "My father is the greatest man on earth," she declared in her toast, raising her glass. "He showed me that hard work and family values are the foundation of any achievement." The guests applauded, and I wiped away tears of pride. My daughter had become a prosperous, beautiful, loving woman. Jasmine would have admired her. But behind this flawless facade lurked ominous signs. Keisha began to show an unsettling curiosity about our finances. At first, it was harmless questions. "Do you have insurance? Have you made a will?" Then came suggestions. "You should place your money somewhere safer." "Derek can advise you on investments." Whenever I told her that Marcus and I handled our own finances, a hard glint flashed in her eyes, quickly replaced by a gentle smile. "Mom, I'm just worried about your future," she would say. "Time takes its toll, and I want guarantees of your security." The real alarm began 6 months ago when we decided to revise our will. After 3 decades of work and saving, we had built considerable wealth, real estate worth $400,000, savings, and securities. Altogether, about $650,000. It was Keisha who urged us to see a notary. "You're both past 50, she remarked over a family dinner. "It's important to settle legal matters." Derek nodded in agreement, lightly brushing my hand with the same fingers that would soon steer their car toward us. "We love you endlessly and just want to make sure you're protected," my daughter added in her melodic tone. How naive I was to mistake those words for genuine affection. Our longtime acquaintance, notary Robert Hammond, explained the options. We could establish a trust, distribute the inheritance among future grandchildren, or sign a standard will. Keisha pressed us to name her sole heir. Besides, she argued, in your later years, you'll need our support. It only makes sense to give us access to resources so we can provide proper care. Her tone unsettled me, but Marcus seemed convinced. My husband was always the more trusting one. I was torn with doubt. I remembered how Jasmine once dreamed of supporting us in our old age, making plans to care for her parents. But Jasmine was gone, and Keisha was the only child we had left. The signing took place on a Tuesday. Keisha arrived in an elegant sand-colored suit and embraced me tightly after the procedure. "From now on, we're bound together forever," she whispered in my ear. Those words sent an inexplicable shiver through me. Derek shook Marcus's hand with a false smile. That evening, while preparing dinner, I was consumed by the sense that we had made a catastrophic mistake. The weeks that followed felt strange. Keisha and Derek visited more often, but their purpose had changed. They no longer came just to spend time with family. They were always offering something: home renovations, new investments, additional insurance policies. "Mom, think about selling this huge house for a smaller apartment," Keisha suggested, her eyes sweeping critically across the room. "We'll help you find something comfortable downtown." But this house was my life. The walls held 3 decades of happiness. The rooms preserved the history of our marriage. I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. When I refused, I caught a flash of anger in Keisha's eyes. "Mom, you're being stubborn for no reason," she snapped, her tone unusually harsh. "This kind of house isn't suitable for people your age. If you fall or something happens, we won't be able to help you in time." Derek chimed in eagerly. "And the upkeep drains your budget. It's smarter to sell now while prices are high and move somewhere more practical." Marcus began to lean toward their arguments. Always pragmatic, my husband started talking about how logical their suggestions were. But I could feel there was something sinister behind their persistence. One evening, after yet another tense discussion, I asked Marcus, "Don't you find Keisha's interest in our money suspicious?" "Sarah, she's just concerned about us," he replied while washing up before bed. "Maybe we should listen to her advice. We're not young anymore." But in his eyes flickered a shadow of doubt he didn't want to admit. Now I understand. Marcus had begun piecing together fragments of a puzzle I couldn't yet see. The breaking point came when Keisha proposed we sign a power of attorney. "A simple formality," she explained while Derek busied himself in our kitchen. "If you get sick or incapacitated, we'll be able to handle financial matters without bureaucratic delays." The suggestion sounded reasonable, almost convincing, but her insistence filled me with unease. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay wide-eyed listening to my husband's breathing, trying to grasp the source of my dread. In the morning, I called my sister Gloria. She had always been more perceptive, more skeptical. After listening to my account of Keisha's pressure, Gloria was silent for a long time. "Sarah," she finally said, "isn't it strange that Keisha is so desperate to control your finances? She has a thriving business, a steady income. Why would she need control?" Her words struck me like a blow. She was absolutely right. Keisha had never shown signs of financial trouble, never asked for loans, never hinted at money problems. That evening, when Keisha arrived for yet another lecture about our future, I decided to confront her directly. "Keisha," I began in the living room, "explain to me why it's so important for you to manage our money." "We're still of sound mind." For a moment, she froze. The mask slipped, and I saw in her eyes a cold cruelty. Then, the smile returned. "I just want to help," she said, her voice hollow. "Isn't it good when a daughter looks after her parents?" There was no care in those words, only threat. Derek intervened in his smooth tone. "Sarah, we only want the best for you. It's hard to watch you worry about problems we could easily solve." After they left, Marcus and I had our first major fight in years. He accused me of being paranoid. I insisted my suspicions were justified. "Marcus," I said as I washed the dishes, "remember what Keisha was like before Jasmine's death? Different, more withdrawn. There was something frightening in her even then." My husband stopped rinsing a plate and looked at me intently. Something new appeared in his eyes. Recognition. "Sarah," he whispered, "I never told you the whole truth about Jasmine's death." My pulse raced so violently I feared for my heart. His words sounded like a sentence, opening the gates of the hell we had lived in for the past 20 years. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. Marcus sank heavily into the kitchen chair, the same one where we had shared thousands of family meals, where Jasmine did her homework, where Keisha always sat in silence. His hands shook as he rubbed his face, as if trying to wipe away memories that had tormented him for 2 decades. "That night, when Jasmine died," he began, his voice breaking, "Keisha wasn't at home studying like we thought. I saw her leave the house around 9. Something about her behavior seemed odd, so I followed her." My husband fell silent, staring at his hands with the expression of a man carrying a crushing burden. "I found them in the parking lot by the mall." They were screaming at each other. Jasmine was waving some papers, and Keisha— Marcus's voice faltered. Keisha was furious. I'd never seen such rage, not even in adults. The world around me began to collapse. "What were they fighting about?" I managed to whisper. "Money, Sarah." Jasmine caught Keisha stealing from our savings. The younger one had been taking money for months, and the older one had gathered proof. It was like being struck by lightning. And what happened then? Jasmine threatened to tell us everything. Keisha started shouting that her sister had always been the favorite, that everything came easy for her. And then— Marcus swallowed hard. Then she shoved Jasmine with all her strength. Jasmine tried to keep her balance, but fell backward and struck her head on the stone curb. I covered my face with my hands. Our younger daughter had killed her sister over money. "Why did you never tell me this?" I accused, the sense of betrayal cutting twice as deep. "Because by the time I reached the park, it was already too late," he answered in a broken voice. Jasmine was lying unconscious, blood running from her head. Keisha stood there in shock, crying and repeating, "She fell, Daddy, I didn't mean it." She looked at me with the eyes of a child and begged me to help her. Tears streamed down my cheeks. "But you knew it was murder." "I saw the push, Sarah. I saw our 13-year-old daughter kill her sister. But when the paramedics arrived, Jasmine was already dead, and Keisha begged me not to ruin her life. She was a child who had done something terrible. I hoped it would teach her a lesson." "Did she return the stolen money?" I asked, though Marcus's face had already given me the answer. "Never. On the contrary, she kept stealing. Small amounts I pretended not to notice. Every time I stayed silent, I became her accomplice. Every day of my silence made me an accessory to her crime. The horrifying truth began to piece itself together in my mind. So that's why she's so desperate to get into our finances now?" "Exactly. It's not about caring for us. She wants to finish what she started 20 years ago." Marcus stood and pulled a stack of papers from the desk drawer, hidden beneath other documents. "There's something else, Sarah. Something I discovered a few weeks ago." He handed me bank statements and records. "I secretly checked Keisha's finances. Her salons aren't thriving the way she wants us to believe. In fact, she's on the verge of bankruptcy. She owes more than $200,000 to banks and suppliers." The papers shook in my hands. Keisha wasn't a successful businesswoman. She was a desperate fraud, living off stolen money and loans. "Does Derek know about this?" "I'm sure he does. I've noticed how he steers the conversation whenever they ask about our savings, the value of the house, the insurance policies. These aren't innocent questions, Sarah. They're the questions of people calculating what our deaths are worth. But his words were cut short by the ringing phone. The screen lit up with a name, Keisha. "Hello, Mommy," came her sweet voice, which now sounded to me like the voice of a demon. "Derek and I were talking, and we thought it would be wonderful to celebrate your 30th wedding anniversary in a special way. How about a weekend trip to the mountains? A family outing, photos, a perfect day together." My blood ran cold. I looked at Marcus, who had heard the conversation and was staring back at me with the same horror. "That's very kind of you, dear," I managed to reply with a trembling voice, "but let us think about it. We'll call you tomorrow." After I hung up, Marcus and I sat in silence, both realizing we had just been invited to our own execution. "The mountains?" I whispered. "She plans to kill us in the mountains and make it look like an accident." Marcus gave a grim nod, just like she did with Jasmine. Only this time, we know the truth. That night we didn't sleep, lying in each other's arms, planning how to escape our own child. "We can't refuse," Marcus said. "If we don't go, they'll find another way to kill us. Maybe something that looks even more natural, a house fire or a robbery. At least in the mountains we'll know what they're planning." "Then what do you suggest?" I asked, desperately searching for a way to save our lives. Marcus was silent for several minutes before answering. "We'll go, but we'll be prepared. I'll hide a phone and record everything. If we survive, we'll have proof. If we don't, at least someone will know the truth." We spent Friday evening barely touching our dinner. We knew it might be the last meal in our home, in the kitchen where we had shared thousands of happy moments as a real family. Marcus wrote a letter to his sister Gloria, explaining everything we knew about Jasmine's death and about Keisha's plans against us. He hid it where we kept our most important documents. Saturday dawned with a clear sky, as if mocking our situation. Keisha arrived early, whistling a cheerful tune that chilled me to the bone. "Good morning, lovebirds," she called from the doorway. "Ready for a big adventure?" Derek followed close behind, radiant like a groom on his wedding day. Only this was a wedding with death. At breakfast, which we could hardly swallow, Keisha carefully outlined the plan. "It's a wonderful spot," she said, spreading a map across the table. "We'll drive to the trailhead and leave the cars there. Then we'll hike up to a viewpoint overlooking the whole valley. They say the scenery is breathtaking. By evening, we'll return to the cars and head home." Her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm that looked demonic. "The trail has some steep sections," Derek added, "but nothing seasoned hikers like you can't handle." While they loaded the cars, I noticed Keisha checking her backpack with meticulous care. I caught a glimpse of ropes, a small shovel, and what looked like a flare gun. "For safety," she explained quickly when she saw me looking. "If anything goes wrong, we can signal for help." We decided to take 2 cars, Marcus and I in ours, Keisha and Derek in their Jeep. "It's just more convenient," Keisha explained, though I suspected another motive. The drive into the mountains took 2 hours, stretching into an eternity. Their Jeep led the way up the winding road, while we followed close behind. Marcus discreetly started recording on his phone. "Everything that happens next will be on tape," he whispered. "If we survive, we'll have proof." When we finally reached the trailhead, my heart was pounding so violently I thought it might burst from my chest. The place was beautiful. Towering pines, the sound of a babbling stream, a small parking area for a few cars. But for me, it was the stage for our execution. Keisha and Derek pulled out their backpacks, smiling and laughing as if this were the happiest day of their lives. "Ready for the adventure?" Keisha asked, and for the first time in 20 years, I saw the same cold glint in her eyes that I had seen the night Jasmine died. The trail began gently, winding between dense trees and moss-covered boulders. Keisha walked ahead, constantly taking photos and marveling at the scenery. "Look at these wildflowers," she exclaimed, "and what a beautiful bird." Her performance was flawless, the role of a loving daughter enjoying a special day with her parents. Derek walked behind us, pretending to make sure we didn't fall behind, but I felt his gaze on my back like the edge of a knife. After an hour of walking, we began climbing a steeper section of the trail. Our legs were heavy. Marcus was struggling to breathe. We weren't used to such exertion, and our killers knew it. "We're almost at the viewpoint," Keisha announced, though the map showed we still had another 30 minutes to go. "Oh, look!" she suddenly cried, pointing to a rock formation off to the side. "That cliff has an incredible view. Let's go up there for some special photos." My blood froze. This was it, the place chosen for our deaths. The cliff rose about 80 feet above the main trail, reached by a narrow path. The rocks were loose, with hardly any trees for support. Beyond it yawned a sheer drop. "I'm not sure this is a good idea," I said. "That path looks dangerous." But Keisha was already heading toward the side trail. "Come on, Mom," she urged. "It'll only take a few minutes. The pictures from up there will be amazing." Marcus squeezed my hand gently, reminding me that the phone was recording everything. We had to see this through, to reach the place where we might finally have proof. The climb up to the cliff was exhausting, but the most terrifying part was realizing just how perfectly this spot was suited for murder. At the viewpoint, Keisha pulled out her camera. "Step over here for some photos," she ordered, pointing to the very edge of the cliff. Marcus and I moved forward slowly. I saw Derek strategically position himself behind us. "Perfect," Keisha exclaimed. "Now put your arms around each other and smile." We embraced while she snapped picture after picture. "One more," Derek suggested, "but step back a little. One step back would put us right on the edge of the abyss." Marcus and I exchanged a glance. The moment had come. But suddenly, voices echoed along the trail. Other hikers were approaching. A group of 4 appeared on the main path, talking and laughing loudly. Keisha and Derek froze. Their plan had collapsed. Witnesses made the murder impossible. "Oh, what beautiful photos!" one of the hikers shouted from below. "We want to take some up there, too." Keisha's face darkened with rage, but she was forced to smile and wave. "Of course," she called out, her voice falsely cheerful. "It's an amazing spot." The next half hour we spent posing with strangers who had unknowingly saved our lives. Keisha and Derek were forced to keep playing the roles of a happy family. But I noticed Derek glancing at his watch again and again, and Keisha clenching her fists in anger. "It's time to head back," she finally announced. "It's getting late and the mountain road is dangerous after dark." Her words sounded ominous. I knew the plan had changed. If they couldn't kill us on the cliff, they'd find another way. The descent was silent and tense. Keisha no longer admired the scenery, and Derek had stopped joking. They whispered to each other when they thought we couldn't hear. By the time we returned to the cars, dusk had settled. Mountain shadows stretched longer. The air grew colder. "Maybe we should stop somewhere for dinner," I suggested, desperate to delay the drive. "No," Keisha snapped. "Better to get home before dark." But the sun was already sinking behind the peaks, and it was clear that most of the trip would be in darkness. We climbed back into our cars, Keisha and Derek still leading in their Jeep, us following. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. "Marcus," I whispered, "they're planning something." I saw the way they looked at each other. My husband gripped the wheel tighter. "I know." The phone is still recording. Whatever happens, we already have proof of their intentions at the cliff. The mountain road was narrow and winding, with sharp turns and cliffs dropping away on both sides. Guardrails were only in the most dangerous spots. In the dark, the headlights illuminated just a few meters ahead. For the first 30 minutes, the drive was calm. I began to think maybe my fear was just paranoia. But then Keisha's Jeep began behaving strangely. First, it slowed down, letting us come dangerously close. Then it suddenly sped up, leaving us far behind on a sharp curve. "What are they doing?" Marcus muttered. We didn't know it yet, but Keisha and Derek were moving to the final stage of their plan. Plan B, crueler than pushing us from a cliff. Up ahead, the red taillights of their Jeep appeared again. It was parked sideways across the narrow road, blocking the way. Marcus had no choice but to brake hard. "What's wrong?" I cried as Keisha stepped out of the car and walked toward us. "Looks like engine trouble," she said, approaching the driver's window. "Derek's checking." But as she came closer, I saw something metallic in her hand, a tool, or maybe a key. And then I realized their new plan. They weren't going to push us off the road themselves. They were going to tamper with our car, damage the brakes or the steering, so that on one of the next curves we'd go over the edge by ourselves. "Marcus," I whispered urgently, "don't turn off the engine. Whatever happens, be ready to drive." At that moment, Derek appeared on the other side of our car. In his hands was a heavy rock. Their plan was clear. They were going to smash the windows, injure us or disable the car, and then send us over the cliff. "Now!" Marcus shouted, slamming his foot down on the gas. Our car lurched forward, but the Jeep still blocked the road. At the last second, Marcus swerved, trying to squeeze past along the very edge of the cliffside. That's when Derek hurled the rock at our rear window. The shattering glass, our screams, the screech of metal scraping rock. Marcus lost control. The last thing I remember is our car flipping over the guardrail and plunging into the abyss. Above us, I heard Keisha and Derek's triumphant cries. They had finally succeeded. The impact was brutal. I heard the sickening crack of breaking bones, the sound of my own body hitting the rocks. The pain was unbearable, but even worse was the taste of blood in my mouth and the certainty that this time Keisha had won. This time there would be no witnesses left to tell the truth. Then I heard Marcus's voice, weak but clear. "Sarah, don't move. Pretend to be dead." And in that moment I realized the impossible. We were still alive. Agony shot through every cell of my body. I felt blood streaming down my face, something wet soaking through my clothes. But Marcus's words echoed in my ears like a divine command. Pretend to be dead. With a willpower I never knew I had, I remained utterly still, controlling even my breathing so it wouldn't give me away. Minutes later, I heard a car creeping down the slope. Keisha and Derek had come to check their work. "Are they dead?" Derek's voice rang out, echoing through the ravine. Keisha climbed down toward our wrecked car. My heart pounded so loudly I feared she would hear it. "They're both dead," she announced after a few minutes. "Finally." No more obstacles. Her voice wasn't that of a grieving daughter. It was the triumphant growl of a predator. "Perfect," Derek whispered with chilling satisfaction. The plan worked flawlessly. A car accident on a dangerous mountain road at night. No one will suspect murder. "Remember the story," Keisha instructed. "We were driving ahead when we saw in the mirror that their car went off the road. We stopped immediately and tried to help, but it was too late. It's vital that our accounts match." "I know," Derek said. "We're the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. Poor relatives who lost loved ones in a terrible accident." Then came a sound that froze my blood. Laughter. They were laughing over our supposedly lifeless bodies. "At least we'll never have to pretend we love those old people again," Keisha sneered. $650,000, Derek said dreamily, "plus the insurance. We're free and rich, and I'll never have to see their judging eyes again," Keisha added bitterly, "especially Mom's with her constant suspicions." Their car engine roared as they drove back up to the road. Now they would go play their roles, return to town, discover our disappearance, raise the alarm. When silence returned, Marcus whispered my name. "Sarah, are you all right?" "Alive," I whispered back. "In pain, but alive. And you? Left leg's broken, some ribs too. But most importantly, the phone is intact and it recorded everything. Marcus's phone had captured it all, their confessions, their plans, everything. But we were still trapped at the bottom of the ravine, injured and cut off from the outside world. The next hours were the longest of my life. We lay in the wreckage, waiting for dawn, praying someone would find us before our wounds, or the cold, finish the job. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, racked with pain. I feared I would lose him forever. "Don't leave me," I whispered to him. "We have to make it till morning. We have to tell the truth about Keisha." Dawn brought the sound of a helicopter. Someone had spotted the wreck of our car and called for rescue. "There are 2 of them," shouted a rescuer as he descended on a rope. "Both alive, but in critical condition." I wanted to scream to tell the truth, but I had no strength. We had to reach the hospital first. Only there could we safely speak to the police. In the medical helicopter flying us to the hospital, I felt Marcus's presence on the stretcher beside me. From the medic's conversations, I gathered that his injuries were worse than mine, but we would both survive. When we arrived, chaos engulfed us. Doctors and nurses worked on our broken bodies, while somewhere in the waiting room, Keisha and Derek played the roles of grieving relatives. Hours later, when my condition had stabilized, a doctor came to me. "Mrs. Johnson, it's a miracle you survived. Your daughter and her fiancé are very worried. They said they were driving ahead and saw your car run off the road." "Doctor," I whispered weakly, "I need to speak to the police." This was not an accident. The doctor frowned. "Mrs. Johnson, you may have a concussion. Head injuries can cause—" "No," I cut him off sharply. "My daughter tried to kill us." "My husband has recordings. Check his phone." An hour later, Detective Rodriguez, a middle-aged man with a grave expression, entered my room. "Mrs. Johnson, I understand you've suffered a severe trauma. The doctor tells me you're making very serious accusations against your own family." "Detective," I said, summoning all my strength. "My daughter Keisha and her boyfriend Derek deliberately drove us off the road. This was attempted murder. My husband has an audio recording of everything." The detective listened intently. When I mentioned the phone, his eyes lit up. "Your husband recorded evidence?" "Yes. Everything is on his phone. Their plans at the cliff, their confessions after the crash, all of it." The detective immediately went to Marcus's room. My husband had regained consciousness, and when told of the situation, he handed over the phone without hesitation. "Here it is," he said weakly. 20 years of lies and the truth about what happened today." While technicians analyzed the recording, Keisha and Derek continued their act in the waiting area, accepting condolences from other hospital visitors. "The recording is clear," the detective announced an hour later. "We have confessions about Jasmine's murder, the plans to kill you both, and their conversation after the crash where they openly discuss their success. It's more than enough." "The time has come," he added. "The warrants are signed. We're arresting them now." Through my hospital window, I watched as officers quietly took up positions. The moment I had waited 20 years for had finally arrived. "Keisha Thompson and Derek Johnson," I heard an officer's firm voice. "You are under arrest for the murder of Jasmine Johnson and the attempted murder of Sarah and Marcus Johnson." The silence that followed was deafening. Then came Keisha's hysterical cry. "What are you talking about? We're the victims. Our parents died in an accident." "Ma'am," the officer replied calmly, "your parents are alive and have provided full evidence of your crimes." Derek's desperate shout, "That's impossible. We saw them die." Over the radio, I heard their alliance collapse in an instant. "It was his idea," Keisha screamed. "You told me to ram their car," Derek yelled back. The following days were a whirlwind of police interviews, visits from lawyers, and relentless media attention. The local press called it the most brutal family betrayal in the state's history. My sister Gloria arrived, crying as she embraced me. Sarah, I always knew something was wrong with Keisha, but I never imagined the scale of her evil. 3 weeks later, Marcus and I were able to return home. Our wounds had healed enough for us to move, though we both carried permanent reminders of that night. The trial began 6 months later. On the day I testified, I looked Keisha straight in the eyes. I saw no remorse, no love, only a cold, calculating stranger who had worn my daughter's mask for 20 years. Keisha, I don't know who you are, but you are no longer my daughter. My daughter died the night you killed Jasmine. The audio from Marcus's phone was played in court. The jury heard every word, murder plots, confessions, their mocking laughter over our bodies. The jury deliberated for only 2 days. Keisha was found guilty of first-degree murder for Jasmine's death and first-degree attempted murder of Marcus and me. Derek received the same charges as her accomplice. Both were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A year has passed. Marcus and I live quietly now, healing wounds deeper than the physical ones. The house feels larger without the sounds of family, but more peaceful without the weight of lies. Every evening we sit on the porch and speak of Jasmine, her kindness, her dream of becoming a doctor, and the life she might have lived if she had survived. We established a scholarship in her name for medical students. It is our way of carrying forward her dream of helping others. People ask me if I regret not uncovering the truth about Keisha sooner. But how can a mother suspect her own child of murder? The truth is, families can hide the darkest secrets, and the people we love most are capable of causing the deepest pain. But we still have each other. We still have the truth. And for the first time in 20 years, we can live without fear. It is not the family we planned, but it is an honest one. There is a certain sad beauty in that. Sometimes at night I still hear Keisha's voice on the phone. Ready for a big adventure? And I realize that the greatest adventure was surviving betrayal by our own blood. But we survived. We told the truth. And Jasmine can finally rest in peace, knowing her killer has been brought to justice. Family secrets have a way of surfacing. Sometimes it happens too late, but justice, even when delayed, is still justice. And in that, there is a bitter kind of comfort.